The morning started like any other school trip. Daiho walked through the nature preserve with his classmates, looking at birds and trees. He was 8 years old and loved animals. His teacher had brought the whole class to see the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. It was a special place where sick or injured animals got better before going back to nature. Daiho stood in front of a glass window, watching a strange animal inside. The sign said it was a honey badger. The creature was small and looked funny with its white stripe down the back. But when it turned to look at him, Daiho saw something in its eyes. This animal was not afraid of anything. "That one is mean," another student said. "The keeper told me it bites everyone." Daiho smiled. He liked that the badger was brave and strong, even though it was small. Then everything changed. The sky turned dark, even though it was morning. A huge shadow covered the whole preserve. Daiho looked up and saw something impossible. A giant ship floated in the air above them. It was not like any airplane he had ever seen. The ship was made of dark metal and had strange lights all over it. His teacher screamed, "Run, everyone run!" But before Daiho could move, a bright light surrounded him. His feet lifted off the ground. He was floating up toward the ship. He tried to grab onto a tree, but his hands went through the branches like they were not real. Other children were screaming and running away. Daiho wanted to scream too, but his voice would not work. Inside the ship, strange creatures grabbed him. They were tall, much taller than any person. Their skin was gray and rough like stone. They had 4 arms each and eyes that glowed red. Daiho had never been so scared in his life. But he remembered what his father always said. Scared is okay. Crying is okay. But giving up is not okay. So Daiho did not cry. He kept his mouth closed tight and looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The creatures spoke in a language he did not know. Their voices sounded like rocks grinding together. One of them pushed him into a small room. The walls were metal and cold. There was nothing inside except a hard bench. Then Daiho heard something, a terrible angry sound. The creatures were shouting at each other. There was a loud crash, then another. Something was fighting them. The door to his room opened again. The creatures threw something inside and quickly closed the door. Daiho jumped back. It was the honey badger from the rehabilitation center. The badger looked around the room, its small eyes bright with anger. Then it saw Daiho. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Daiho slowly sat down on the floor. He did not want to scare the animal. "Hey there," Daiho whispered in Korean. "I am scared too, but we will be okay." The honey badger made a huffing sound. It did not attack him. Instead, it walked to the corner and sat down, watching everything with suspicious eyes. The ship moved. Daiho could feel it in his stomach. They were going somewhere far away. He touched his pocket and felt the small photo of his family inside. His mother, father, and older sister Jiwoo smiled at him from the picture. Tears wanted to come, but Daiho pushed them back. Hours passed. Maybe days. Daiho could not tell. The creatures brought food sometimes. It was strange and tasted bad, but Daiho ate it because he needed to stay strong. He noticed the honey badger would not eat it first. So Daiho tore off pieces of his food and slid them across the floor. After a while, the badger ate them. "I will call you Dubu," Daiho said to the animal. In Korean, that meant tofu. It was funny because tofu was soft and gentle, and this badger was the opposite. Dubu made that huffing sound again. Maybe it was a laugh. Finally, the ship stopped moving. The door opened and several creatures came in. They had weapons that looked like long sticks with lights on the end. One of them pointed at Daiho and said something. Another pointed at Dubu. They were separated. 2 creatures grabbed Daiho and carried him down a long hallway. He looked back and saw other creatures trying to catch Dubu. The badger was biting and scratching, making terrible angry sounds. It took 6 of them to hold the small animal. Daiho was brought to a big room. In the center stood a creature that looked different from the others. This one wore clothes with symbols on them. It was clearly important. Next to it stood another creature holding a flat screen with strange writing on it. The important creature spoke. Its voice was deep and sounded mean. The other creature touched the screen and a voice came out speaking in broken Korean. "You are now property of Velkari Empire. You will be trained. You will obey. Resistance is pointless." Daiho looked at the important creature. Even though he was terrified, he asked why. The creature seemed surprised. It spoke again and the screen translated. "Why? Because we can. Because you are weak. All species break eventually. You will too." "No," Daiho said quietly. I will not. The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh. They all say that at first. I am Velmoth. I have trained 10,000 species across 12 star systems. Every single one broke. You will not be different, small human. Deho said nothing else, but in his mind he made a promise. He would not break. He would find a way home. Another creature entered the room. This one wore even more symbols on its clothes. It was clearly the leader. When it spoke, even Velmoth stood straighter. Commander Raxthal, Velmoth said, bowing its head. The commander looked at Deho like he was looking at a bug. This is the human? So small, so weak. And you captured it with its war beast? War beast? Velmoth looked confused. The small creature with black and white fur. It has injured 12 of my soldiers. Our research shows humans use such creatures in combat. They must be companions. Deho almost laughed. They thought Dubu was a pet trained for fighting. They had no idea. Dubu was just angry at everyone. It will take 30 cycles to break them both, Velmoth said. Maybe less. The human is only a child. Commander Raxthal nodded. Make it 20 cycles. I want them ready for the conditioning program quickly. The council wants to see results. As they took Deho to his cell, he heard Dubu somewhere in the distance. The badger was still fighting, still angry. Good, Deho thought. Stay angry, Dubu. Stay strong. In his cold metal cell, Deho took out the photo of his family. He looked at his sister's face. Jiwoo was smart and strong. She would look for him. He knew it. I will come home, he whispered to the photo. I promise. On the other side of the station, Dubu destroyed his third containment cell. The Velkari guards stood back, afraid of the small earth creature. They had no idea what they had captured. They had no idea what was coming. The training would begin tomorrow. But the Velkari Empire had already made their biggest mistake. They thought humans were weak. They were about to learn the truth. The first morning in the training facility began with loud sounds. Deho woke up when bright lights filled his cell. A voice came through speakers in the walls speaking the harsh Velkari language. He did not understand the words yet, but he understood the tone. It was time to start. 2 guards came to his cell. They wore armor now, thick and strong. Deho noticed cuts and bite marks on the armor. Dubu had been busy. They took him to a large gray room. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all the same cold metal. Velmoth stood in the center, watching him with those glowing red eyes. Around the room, other Velkari held weapons and screens. Kneel, the translator voice said. Deho stood still. He looked at Velmoth and asked, why? Velmoth's eyes flickered. The creature stepped closer, using its size to look scary. Because I command it. You will obey all commands. Begin again. Kneel. Why? Deho asked again. The trainer made an angry sound. He said something to a guard. The guard pressed a button and suddenly Deho felt cold air blowing on him. It was not too bad at first, but it kept getting colder and colder. Soon he was shaking. Kneel and the cold stops, Velmoth said. Deho wrapped his arms around himself. His teeth chattered. But he did not kneel. After several minutes, Velmoth made another angry sound and the cold stopped. Take him back to his cell, Velmoth said. No food today. Tomorrow he will be more cooperative. But tomorrow was the same. Deho refused to obey commands that made no sense. Each time he asked, why? The trainers tried different things. They made the room very hot. They played loud, terrible sounds. They left him alone in darkness for hours. Nothing worked. On the 3rd day, Deho heard something that made his heart feel better. Somewhere in the facility, Dubu was making noise. The badger's angry sounds echoed through the metal halls. Then he heard running feet and Velkari shouting. Dubu had escaped again. A young guard ran past Deho's cell. This guard was smaller than the others and did not wear as many symbols. Later, Deho would learn his name was Tixava. The guard looked scared as he chased after the sounds of chaos. That night, lying on his hard bench, Deho started listening carefully to the guards outside his cell. They talked to each other in their rough language. Deho noticed they used some words again and again. He started to learn. Open was one word. Close was another. Food and prisoner and angry creature were others. His father had always said Deho was good at learning languages. Now he had a reason to learn fast. On day 5, the trainers brought him to a different room. This one had a window. On the other side, in another room, was Dubu. The badger looked thin but still angry. When Dubu saw Deho, the animal moved to the window and put its paws on the glass, you see? Velmoth said through the translator. Your companion creature, we have it. If you do not cooperate, we will hurt it. Deho felt anger burn in his chest. He walked to the window and put his hand on the glass where Dubu's paw was. Then he turned to Velmoth. He is not my companion. I just met him when you took us. But if you hurt him, I will never cooperate, never. Velmoth seemed surprised. You care for a creature you just met? Yes, Deho said simply. That is what humans do. That night things changed. The guards brought food to his cell. It was still the strange alien food, but there was more of it. Deho ate half and saved half. Then he went to the corner of his cell where a small gap existed between two metal panels. The gap was not big enough for him to escape, but it was big enough for something else. Dubu, he called softly. Can you hear me? For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard that familiar huffing sound. Dubu was in the next cell. Deho pushed pieces of his food through the gap. He heard Dubu eating them. From that night on, he shared every meal with the badger. Even when the trainers gave him less food to try to break his spirit, Deho still shared. On day 8, Velmoth tried a new method. He brought Deho to the training room and showed him images on a screen. The images showed Earth. They showed destruction and fire. They showed Velkari ships over Earth cities. This will happen if you do not cooperate, the translator said. Your world will burn. But Deho had been listening to the guards. He had learned enough words to understand some of their conversations. He knew the Velkari had rules. They did not attack planets that were part of the galactic community. Earth was protected. This was just a lie to scare him. You are lying, Deho said in broken Velkari language. The whole room went silent. Velmoth's eyes grew bright with surprise. You learned our language? The trainer asked, forgetting to use the translator. Some, Deho replied in Velkari. Enough to know you lie. Velmoth made a sound of frustration. The perfect training record was falling apart. This human child would not break. At night, when the facility was quieter, Deho sang songs. He sang Korean folk songs that his grandmother had taught him. His voice was small, but in the metal halls it carried. The sound-sensitive Velkari guards complained. They banged on his door and told him to stop. But every night he sang anyway. On day 10, Dubu escaped again. This time the badger made it all the way to the training wing. Alarms rang through the whole facility. Guards ran everywhere. Deho heard Velmoth shouting orders. It took them 3 hours to catch Dubu again. Tixva, the young guard, came to check on Deho after the chaos ended. He looked tired and confused. Why does the creature keep fighting? Tixva asked in Velkari. He seemed to forget that prisoners were not supposed to be spoken to like normal beings. Does it not understand it cannot win? Deho understood most of the words. He replied slowly in Velkari. Because fighting is better than giving up. Even if you cannot win, you still fight. That is Earthway. Tixva stared at him for a long moment. Then he walked away without saying anything else. But Deho saw something in the guard's eyes. Doubt. On day 12, Velmoth tried the starvation protocol. They stopped bringing food entirely. This was supposed to make prisoners desperate and obedient. But Deho had hidden pieces of food in his cell. Not much, but enough. And he still shared with Dubu through the gap. When the trainers came to see if he was weak and ready to obey, they found him sitting calmly on his bench. He had used the time to practice more Velkari words by listening through the walls. You should be begging for food, Velmoth said. I am okay, Deho replied in Velkari. You give food later. Or you do not. I still not obey. Velmoth left the room in anger. Outside, Deho heard him talking to other trainers. The words were fast, but Deho caught the meaning. Velmoth was asking for permission to use stronger methods. The costs were already high. Many guards were injured. Equipment was damaged. Time was running out. That night, lying in his cell, Deho touched the photo in his pocket. He thought about his sister Jiwoo. She was probably so worried. His parents, too. But Deho had learned something important in these days. The Velkari could hurt him. They could scare him. But they could not break him if he chose not to break. Through the gap in the wall, he heard Dubu breathing. The badger was tired from another day of fighting guards, but it was still there, still strong, still refusing to give up. Good night, Dubu, Deho whispered. Tomorrow we fight again. In his office, Velmoth looked at reports. Costs were climbing. Injuries were mounting. For the first time in his long career, he felt something new. He felt worried. The human child and the small Earth creature were not breaking. They were supposed to break by now. What had the Velkari Empire captured? Week 3 began with a new plan. Velmoth had requested a meeting with Commander Raxthal. The costs were becoming a serious problem. Medical treatment for injured guards had cost 45,000 credits. Containment repairs added another 23,000. They were behind schedule, and the commander was not happy. "Perhaps we have been approaching this wrong," Velmoth said during the meeting. "We have kept them separate. Maybe we should train them together. The human cares for the creature." "We can use that." Commander Raxthal nodded slowly. "Use the creature to control the human." "Yes, do it." This was exactly what the Velkari should not have done. The next morning, guards brought Deho to a new training room. This one was bigger and had obstacles and equipment spread around. In the corner, in a cage, sat Dubu. When the badger saw Deho, it made an excited huffing sound. "Today you will complete the obstacle course," Velmoth explained through the translator. "Your creature watches. If you fail, the creature gets no food. If you refuse, the creature gets hurt. Now you have a reason to cooperate." Deho looked at the obstacle course. It had walls to climb, bars to swing from, and narrow paths to balance on. For an 8-year-old, it looked very hard, but Deho had been watching everything carefully for 3 weeks. He had watched how doors opened. He had watched how the security panels worked. He had learned which buttons the guards pressed. "I will try," Deho said in Velkari. This surprised the trainers. The human was finally cooperating. Velmoth allowed himself to feel hope. Maybe the breakthrough was finally happening. Deho started on the obstacle course. He climbed the first wall slowly. It was hard, but he made it. He crossed the balance beam carefully. The trainers watched. Everything seemed to be working. Then Deho reached the part of the course near a control panel on the wall. He had noticed this panel 3 times when guards had brought him through this area. He had watched a guard use it. The guard had pressed 3 buttons in a pattern. Green, blue, green. Deho jumped from the obstacle course toward the panel. Before the surprised guards could react, he pressed the buttons. Green, blue, green. Every cage in the facility opened at once. Dubu burst out of the cage with a sound that made the Velkari guards step back in fear. The badger ran straight toward Deho, but it did not stop there. It saw the trainers who had been keeping them prisoner and went after them. Alarms screamed through the facility. Red lights flashed everywhere. The training room became chaos. Dubu attacked anyone in armor. The guards tried to use their weapons, but they were afraid of hitting each other in the confusion. Deho ran to a corner and stayed low, watching everything. Velmoth shouted orders, but nobody could hear him over the alarms. More guards rushed into the room. This just made things worse because Dubu attacked them too. In the chaos, other prisoners from other parts of the facility escaped into the halls. It took 6 hours to restore order. The training wing had to be completely shut down. Dubu was finally caught when they used a net instead of trying to grab the angry badger. Deho was found sitting calmly in his corner, a small smile on his face. Commander Raxthal arrived the next day. He was very angry. The damage reports showed costs of 178,000 credits. 34 trainers needed medical leave. The timeline was now 3 weeks behind schedule. "Explain this disaster," Raxthal demanded from Velmoth. "The human child is more intelligent than we assessed," Velmoth admitted. "He learned our language by listening. He studied our security systems by watching. He used our own protocols against us." "He is 8 years old," Raxthal said slowly, his voice dangerous. "An 8-year-old child from a primitive planet has defeated our security systems?" Velmoth had no good answer. Meanwhile, something else was happening on Earth. In a small apartment in Seoul, a 16-year-old girl named Jiwoo was working at her computer. She had not stopped looking for her little brother since he disappeared. The government said it was investigating. The news said it was probably a strange weather event. Nobody believed that, but nobody knew what really happened. Jiwoo had taught herself computer programming. She had joined online groups that talked about alien encounters. She had contacted every government agency she could find. Most people thought she was crazy, but she did not care. Her little brother was out there somewhere, and she would find him. One night she found something. A transmission had been intercepted by a satellite. It was encrypted, but pieces of it had been decoded by someone. The decoded parts mentioned human specimen and training facility and valuable subject. Jiwoo's hands shook as she read. This was real. Aliens had taken her brother, and they were doing something to him at a facility somewhere in space. She copied all the data she could find. Then she sent it to every news organization, every government agency, every military contact she could reach. Someone had to listen. Someone had to help. Back on the Velkari station, Daeho sat in his cell. The guards had sealed the gap where he used to pass food to Dubu, but he did not need it anymore because now he had something else. Tixfa, the young guard, had started bringing him extra food. Tixfa would put the food through the door slot and then leave quickly, not saying anything. But Daeho saw the conflict in the guard's eyes. Tixfa was starting to question what they were doing. One night, Tixfa stopped outside the cell for a longer time. He spoke in Velkari. Why do you keep fighting? You cannot win. There is nowhere to go even if you escape. Daeho stood up and walked to the door. He could see Tixfa's glowing eyes through the small window. He replied in careful Velkari. Humans have saying, even if there is no hope, we make hope. We do not give up because someone say we cannot win. We fight because fighting is right thing to do. Tixfa was quiet for a moment. The Velkari Empire has trained 10,000 species. All of them broke eventually. You are just one small human. Maybe, Daeho said. But I have Dubu, and I have myself. That is enough. The guard walked away, but Daeho could tell he was thinking hard about those words. The next day, the trainers tried something new. They brought both Daeho and Dubu to the cafeteria where Velkari soldiers ate. The idea was to show them how big and powerful the Velkari were. Hundreds of soldiers filled the huge room. This was another mistake. One soldier decided to scare the human child. He banged his tray on the table and made aggressive sounds. Dubu did not like this. The badger jumped on the table and attacked the soldier. The soldier fell backward into another soldier's food. That soldier got angry and pushed the first soldier. Soon 3 different groups of soldiers were fighting each other, and Dubu was in the middle of it all, making everything worse. Daeho watched from a safe spot near the wall. He was not even trying to cause trouble this time. Dubu did it all by himself. The badger was just naturally good at creating chaos. The cafeteria incident added another 30,000 credits to the damage costs. Commander Raxthal received angry messages from the military council. Insurance companies refused to pay for damage caused by human-related incidents. In the training staff room, Velkari trainers started making bets. The question was not whether the human and the badger would win. The question was who was more dangerous. Half thought the boy was worse because he was smart and planned everything. Half thought the badger was worse because it was fearless and attacked anything. Belmoth sat in his office staring at failure reports. His perfect record was destroyed. The most expensive training operation in Velkari history was falling apart because of an 8-year-old human and a small earth creature that refused to be afraid. Outside, in her cell down the hall, Dubu had already started working on loosening a wall panel. The badger never stopped trying to escape, never stopped fighting, and in his cell, Daeho continued to learn. He listened to every conversation. He watched every pattern. He noticed which guards were kind and which were cruel. He was preparing for something, though he did not know what yet. Far away on Earth, Jiwoo sent out another wave of messages. She included the intercepted transmission data. This time, someone important finally listened. The message reached a military commander named Yunho. Commander Yunho read the report 3 times. Then he picked up his phone and made several calls. It was time for Earth to find out what happened to its missing children. It was time to bring them home. The Velkari Empire had no idea that everything was about to get much, much worse for them. Month 2 began with a military council meeting in Velkari space. Commander Raxthal stood before 5 high-ranking officials, trying to explain how a training operation had become the most expensive failure in recent history. The costs had exceeded 2 million credits. That was more than they spent on some planetary invasions. We need leverage, one council member said. Real leverage. Something that will make the human finally cooperate. Raxthal saw an opportunity to save his reputation. Earth transmissions mention the human's family. We have also intercepted mentions of his teacher. Perhaps capturing someone close to him would work. The council approved the plan. Raxthal felt relief. This would finally solve the problem. He had no idea he was making the worst decision of his career. 3 days later, a teacher named Minho was taken from Earth. He had been driving home from school when a Velkari capture beam pulled him up. Minho was 40 years old and had fought in the Korean military before becoming a teacher. He was calm and smart. He was also Daeho's favorite teacher. When they brought Minho to the station, Velmoth felt hope again. Finally, they had real leverage. They brought Minho to the training room where Daeho waited. Daeho's eyes went wide when he saw his teacher. "Teacher Minho," he called out in Korean. Minho looked at his student and smiled even though they were both prisoners. "Hello, Daeho, are you okay?" "I am okay," Daeho replied. Then in Velkari, which surprised Minho, he added, "They want to train us, make us obey, but I refuse." Minho's eyes showed understanding. His student had learned the alien language. That was smart. "Good," he replied in Korean. "Keep refusing." Velmoth stepped forward. Through the translator, he said, "Human adult, we have your student. If you do not cooperate, he will suffer. If he does not cooperate, you will suffer. Do you understand?" Minho looked at the tall alien trainer. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a scared laugh. It was a real laugh, like someone had told a funny joke. "You think taking me makes things better for you?" Minho said, still smiling. "You have made a very big mistake." That night in the cells, Minho spoke quietly to Daeho through the walls. The guards had put them near each other, thinking it would help with control. "Another mistake. Listen carefully," Minho whispered in Korean. "We need to learn everything about this place. Guard schedules, weak points, security systems. Can you tell me what you have learned?" Daeho told him everything. The guard rotations, the button patterns, the places where security was weak. Minho listened carefully, building a map in his mind. "You have done very well," Minho said proudly. "Now we work together. We plan carefully, and we find our moment." "What about Dubu?" Daeho asked. "The honey badger." "The what?" Minho sounded confused. Then Daeho explained about the angry badger that the aliens had captured by accident. Minho laughed again. "So they think they are fighting one human child. Really, they are fighting a child, an angry badger, and a former soldier. This will be interesting." The next day, training started again, but this time everything was different. Minho had taught Daeho hand signals that the Velkari would not understand. While Velmoth gave orders, Daeho and Minho communicated silently. They pretended to follow some orders but ignored others. They made it seem random, but it was not. They were testing the trainers, learning their reactions. Dubu was brought in too. When the badger saw Minho, it acted just as aggressive as always. But Minho remained calm. He had worked with difficult animals before. He knew fear made them worse. "It is okay," Minho said softly to Dubu. "We are all on the same side." During one training exercise, Velmoth tried to make Daeho climb through a small tunnel. Daeho refused. When they threatened to hurt Minho, Minho told Daeho in Korean, "Do not worry about me. Stay strong." Velmoth was getting frustrated again. The adult human was supposed to care about the child and be easier to control. Instead, he made everything harder. Then Tixava did something brave. The young guard came to Velmoth privately and said, "This is wrong. These are intelligent beings. They should not be treated like this." Velmoth stared at him. "You question the Velkari Empire?" "I question this," Tixva replied. "I have watched the human child for weeks. He shares his food even when he is hungry. He learns our language to understand us. He fights because he wants to go home, not because he is evil. This is wrong." Other guards had been thinking the same thing, but Tixva was the first to say it out loud. Word spread through the station. Many Velkari were starting to feel uncomfortable about what they were doing. One night, Tixva brought extra food to all 3 prisoners. Daeho, Minho, and even Dubu. The badger took the food carefully, making a less angry sound than usual. "Thank you," Minho said to Tixva in simple Velkari that Daeho had taught him. Tixva nodded and walked away quickly. But the next night, he came back. And the night after that, he started leaving doors unlocked for an extra few seconds. He started telling other kind-hearted guards that maybe the humans deserved better treatment. Week 6 of captivity arrived. Commander Raxthal received another report. Costs were now at 2.3 million credits. Station functionality was down to 60% because of all the damage. 40% of personnel had requested transfers to other stations. Insurance companies refused all claims related to human incidents. An investigation had been opened into Raxthal's leadership. His career was falling apart. In desperation, he ordered full suppression mode. This meant they could use any method necessary to break the prisoners. But Velmoth looked at the order and felt sick. He had trained beings for his whole life, but he had never felt bad about it before. The human child had said something to him once that he could not forget. Why? Why do you do this? Velmoth had no good answer. On day 43, Minho decided it was time. He had learned enough. He had seen the patterns. He knew the weak points. That night, he told Daeho and somehow even communicated the plan to Dubu through gestures. When the guards came for morning training, everything seemed normal. They took Minho to the training room first, but when they returned for Daeho, they found his cell empty. The lock had been picked using a small piece of metal Tixva had accidentally left behind. Alarms sounded. Guards ran everywhere. In the chaos, Dubu's cell door opened. No one knew if it was Tixva who did it, or if Daeho had reached the controls. Dubu ran through the halls like a furry missile of anger. Minho fought the guards in the training room using techniques from his military days. He was one human against many aliens, but he used their own size against them. When they tried to grab him, he moved around them. When they tried to surround him, he used the equipment in the room to his advantage. Daeho appeared at a security terminal. His small fingers flew over the controls. He had watched guards use these systems for weeks. Now he opened every cell in the detention wing. Dozens of alien prisoners from other species ran free. The station descended into total chaos. In the command center, Commander Raxthal watched his career end in real time. The station was falling apart. The costs were climbing by the minute. And at the center of it all were one human child, one human adult, and one absolutely fearless honey badger. By the end of the day, Daeho, Minho, and Dubu had taken control of an entire section of the station. Other prisoners had joined them. Tixva had openly defected, bringing other questioning guards with him. They held their ground in the detention wing, and the Velkari could not push them out without causing even more damage. In that small free zone, Minho put his hand on Daeho's shoulder. You did well, student. Your parents would be proud. Daeho smiled. Then he thought of his sister. Jiwoo is looking for me, I know it. She never gives up either. He was right. On Earth, Jiwoo had finally made people listen. Ships were being prepared. Help was coming. The Velkari Empire had broken trying to train a honey badger and a human child. Now they were about to discover that the rest of humanity was just as stubborn. Month 3 began with Earth ships entering Velkari space. The lead ship was commanded by a man named Yunho. He was a decorated military commander who had served for 20 years. When he read Jiwoo's reports about her missing brother and the intercepted transmissions, he knew this was real. Earth had to act. The fleet consisted of 3 ships. They were not huge war vessels. Earth was still new to space travel, but they carried human determination and advanced weapons that had been developed in secret. The galaxy was about to learn that humans did not abandon their own. On the Velkari station, Commander Raxthal received word of the approaching ships. He felt a moment of relief. Finally, he could negotiate. He could return the troublesome humans and salvage something from this disaster. The costs had now reached 14.7 million credits. His career was destroyed, but maybe he could avoid prison. He had no idea how wrong he was. In the detention wing, Daeho stood at a communication console. Minho had taught him how to use it. For 3 months, Daeho had been learning everything about the station's systems. Now it was time to use that knowledge. Can you really do this? Tixva asked nervously. The young Velkari guard had fully joined their side. He wore no armor now and helped guard the freed prisoners instead. Yes, Daeho said confidently. His Velkari language was perfect now. Teacher Minho showed me how. Daeho pressed several buttons. Suddenly, his voice echoed through every speaker on the station. He spoke in Velkari, clear and strong. My name is Daeho. I am 8 years old from Earth. For 3 months, the Velkari Empire has kept me prisoner. They tried to break my spirit. They tried to make me obey. They hurt me and my friends, but we did not break. We fought back. Now ships from Earth are coming. They are coming for me. They are coming for Teacher Minho, and they will not leave until we are free. To all prisoners on this station, be ready. Freedom is coming. In the command center, Raxthal heard the broadcast and felt his blood run cold. The human child spoke perfect Velkari. He had accessed the station-wide communication system. Other alien prisoners were hearing this message and getting hope. Then Raxthal heard something worse. From the detention wing came sounds of celebration. Other species that had been captured and held prisoner were joining the humans. The rebellion was spreading. Commander Yunho's ship arrived at the station and sent a transmission. "This is Commander Yunho of Earth Defense Forces. We are here to retrieve our citizens who were illegally abducted. Send them out peacefully or we will take them by force." Raxthal tried to sound strong in his reply. "You are in Velkari space. You have no authority here. Leave or we will consider this an act of war." On Earth's ship, Yunho smiled. He had read all of Jiwoo's reports. He knew what Daiho and the honey badger had done to this station. "We both know your station is barely functional. We both know you cannot afford another incident. Send out our people now." Before Raxthal could reply, Daiho hijacked the transmission. His voice came through both ships. "Commander Yunho, this is Daiho. We are in the detention wing. We control 3 sectors. There are 42 other prisoners here from different species. Please help them too." Yunho felt his heart swell with pride. This brave child was not just thinking about himself. He was thinking about all the prisoners. "We will get everyone out, Daiho. Hold on." Raxthal knew he was defeated. The costs, the damage, the rebellion, and now Earth ships demanding their people back. The Velkari Empire could not afford a war with Earth. Not when the whole galaxy would hear about how a human child had destroyed their most advanced training facility. But Raxthal was too proud to surrender peacefully. He decided on one last desperate move. He would go to the detention wing himself and try to capture Daiho as a hostage. Maybe he could still negotiate from a position of strength. He took 6 of his best guards and went to the detention wing. They forced open the doors that Daiho's group had sealed. Raxthal walked in, trying to look confident. "Human child," he called out. "Come with me now and no one else gets hurt." Daiho stepped out from behind a barricade. Minho stood beside him. Behind them were Tixva and dozens of freed prisoners. And sitting calmly at Daiho's feet was Dubu. "No," Daiho said simply in Velkari. "You hurt me. You hurt my teacher. You hurt all these people. Now you will face consequences." Raxthal laughed. "You are one child. I have 6 trained warriors. You will obey." "One child, yes," Minho said, stepping forward, "but also one soldier." He cracked his knuckles. "And one very angry honey badger," Daiho added. At the word angry, Dubu stood up. The badger looked at Raxthal and made a sound that sent chills down the commander's spine. It was a sound of pure rage and absolute fearlessness. What happened next became legendary in galactic history. Raxthal and his guards tried to capture Daiho. Dubu attacked first, going straight for the commander. The guards tried to help their leader but found themselves fighting Minho, who moved like water and struck like stone. The freed prisoners joined in. Tixva used his knowledge of Velkari combat to help Minho. The fight lasted 3 minutes. By the end, Raxthal was running through the station halls screaming in terror with Dubu chasing him. The honey badger chased the commander all the way to the command deck, where every officer saw their leader fleeing in panic from a small Earth creature. Velkari High Command watched this happen through security cameras. They immediately ordered a complete surrender. The costs, the embarrassment, the rebellion, and now their top commander running from a badger. It was too much. 2 hours later, human ships docked with the station. Commander Yunho walked through the halls with his soldiers. They found Daiho, Minho, and Dubu in the detention wing, surrounded by freed prisoners of many species. Yunho looked at the 8-year-old child who had fought an empire and won. "Are you ready to go home, Daiho?" Daiho nodded. Then he said, "But all these others too. They all go free." "Yes," Yunho agreed. "Everyone goes free." The Velkari Empire signed a treaty that day. They released all prisoners. They paid massive reparations to Earth and other affected worlds. They shut down all training facilities. They agreed to never approach Earth space again. And they added a new rule to their military handbook. Never underestimate humans and definitely never capture their wildlife. Velmoth, the veteran trainer, left the military. He became a teacher instead, working to reform how the Velkari treated other species. He never forgot the human child who asked why, and changed his whole worldview. On the journey home, Daiho sat next to Dubu. The honey badger had calmed down slightly now that they were safe. Minho sat across from them, smiling. "You know," Minho said, "most students write about normal things for their summer vacation reports. You will have quite a story, Deho laughed. Then he asked, "Can Dubu come home with me? He has nowhere else to go." Yunho, who was listening, said, "That will require special permits and a lot of paperwork. But yes, that badger earned it." When they reached Earth, the whole world was watching. The ships landed in Seoul, where Deho's family waited. Jiwoo saw her little brother and ran to him, crying and laughing at the same time. Their parents held both children close. Reporters asked Deho questions. "How did you survive? How did you defeat them?" Deho thought about it. Then he said, "They thought humans were weak. They thought we would give up. But we never give up. Even when we are scared, even when it seems impossible, we keep fighting. That is what makes humans special." Someone asked about Dubu. "Is that honey badger dangerous?" Deho looked at his friend. Dubu sat calmly, looking at all the people with suspicious eyes. "Yes," Deho said honestly. "Very dangerous, but also very brave, like humans." 6 months later, Deho gave a presentation at school about his summer vacation. His classmates did not believe him at first. Then Dubu walked into the classroom with Minho supervising. The principal evacuated the building as a precaution, but nothing bad happened. Dubu just sat next to Deho's desk and took a nap. In space, at Earth's new orbital defense station, Commander Yunho watched the news coverage and smiled. Earth had proven itself to the galaxy. They were strong, determined, and they protected their own. In Valkyrie space, Raxthal worked at a small desk job filing reports. Every time he heard children laughing, he flinched. He would never forget the 8-year-old who destroyed his empire. And at Valkyrie military academies, new soldiers learned about the honey badger incident. It became required study. The lesson was simple. Never underestimate someone because they are small. Never assume they will break because you are strong. And most importantly, never make the mistake of capturing a human and their animal friend. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans were not weak. They were not easy to break. They would fight for freedom, for each other, and for what was right. Even an 8-year-old human child could bring down an empire. And somewhere in Seoul, in a house with special reinforced fencing, Dubu slept in the sun while Deho did his homework. They had fought together, survived together, and now they would live in peace together. Two small beings who had shown the whole galaxy the meaning of courage.